And if I may, first of all, I always look at any type of discrimination as being just another form of bullying. And I've gone on record numerous times that bullying is something I just can't stand for. I hate any type of bullying whatsoever, and discrimination is, in fact, bullying. Now, that being said, 4 or 5 years ago, as you brought up, we talked about this and changing city policy verbiage on discrimination. And at that particular time, you advised us that you felt that the wording that we already had within our own discrimination policy was sufficient to cover all areas of discrimination. So we're back to kind of the same discussion that, okay, so now we've got a couple other categories that we need to actually list out. And the question then was, where does it stop? I mean, how long do we have to continue to list out categories of people that you cannot discriminate against? Why doesn't the 14th Amendment cover the whole thing? Why can't we have verbiage that comes out and says you can't discriminate for any particular reason, for any reason, against anybody? I mean, why do we have to identify every single group that we don't want to discriminate against? Next thing it's going to, if you've got somebody who wants to bring, I don't know, I'm not even going to get into something ridiculous, but you could. And pretty soon you're being discriminated against if you bring 4 monkeys into a business. And the owner says, I don't want you in here. And so now the next thing you have to put that. And there's no way I'm drawing a parallelism between transsexuals and gays at all. They're much, much more distinctive and important group. But do you understand my point?
I understand your point.
What's changed since 5 years ago?
Let me address it this way. I think that what was happening a number of years ago was whether or not the city wanted to have an internal policy that explicitly expressed that the city will not discriminate against its own employees. And it was my understanding, and everybody may have a different understanding, was that because we have a track record of not discriminating against our own, and we had certain people that could be characterized as falling into these categories, it was unnecessary for us. But that's because the city has control over its employment. The city council does, the mayor does, the city supervisor does, and each department head does. This involves people who are other than the city. So this is more extensive than what the city could do. And one of the parts of the discussion last time was whether or not it was important for the city to make it explicit rather than implicit that we would not discriminate against our own employees. This is a little different. To answer your other question, at least one of the ways that I would think about that is that you ask how long and how many kinds of things we're going to list. Until there's no discrimination, I suppose that we will keep listing things until people learn that it's just inappropriate to do, right? However, these two categories, if you look at the news and understand reports, seem to be more frequent victims of abuse and discrimination than left-handers. I'm left-handed, but I don't require that you treat me like a right-hander, even though sometimes I wished you would. But
we have a majority.
But that doesn't mean that I won't get a job or people are going to make judgments about. Maybe it does, But what I'm saying is that the way people act in their public and private lives, as you say, they should be able to do business with anyone. And so I think that that's what you're seeing. The other thing is that since I think there's a clear trend here, too, that always kind of raises, my awareness that if so many places in Idaho are considering something like this, it tells me that there's a very real possibility that's a problem that they're trying to address, and that the state and the federal government have not addressed it. And so at some point you think that there'll be a critical mass, and then the tipping point will be that maybe it's time for the federal government to add that as one of their categories, so that they wouldn't be discriminating against those in those categories. But they haven't done it. So I think that's what the zeitgeist is
it just seems like we get on such a slippery slope when we start trying to identify all the different categories of entities that we cannot discriminate against. As an example, we said there's not to be any dogs in the farmer's market. Therefore, we're discriminating against people that take their dogs in there. So I guess I'm confused as to how you define when and where you can discriminate. I want a real simple answer that simply says, morally, we're going to treat each other right, and we're just not going to discriminate against each other. And I guess that's not going to happen, so we'll continue to legislate morality.
Doesn't sound like it needs an answer from me. I'll leave that to the elected officials.
Okay, Tim.
Thank you, Sue. You characterized your presentation as summed up in a nutshell. It looks more like the Rose Bowl to me. You obviously spent a heck of a lot of time here, and I think very thoroughly. I am concerned, however, when our current city attorney is no longer here, how a replacement would look at this, and maybe we won't have an ordinance in place by then, but it's just a consideration that I annotated on the papers. That having been said, Randy, on page 1, under Boise's ordinance of your memorandum, the last paragraph, Boise based some of the language on the human rights statute rather than on federal language in order to avoid inconsistencies, and because the state of Idaho has already spoken on the matter. Can you paraphrase what the state of Idaho said?
Well,
in general?
Yeah, no, I can't paraphrase it. Basically, it says that people who are human should have the same rights to express themselves and to enjoy their lives. The point of this was that the more conflicts that are created in local ordinances, the more difficult it is when they are compared to other similar ordinances to match them up with the language and for courts to make decisions about what the words mean. Mm-hmm. So I try to make things look like other things so that the judges see the same things. And so all I was saying here was that this isn't based upon fair housing language, for example. It's based upon human rights language, and it's based upon the Idaho's version of human rights language rather than the federal version of human rights language.
Does the state version identify the two areas that you're identifying?
I'd characterize it as yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry.
A couple more. I know that we're under a time squeeze here. Under Pocatello's ordinance, which is on page 3 of the same memorandum, under E, Pocatello's draft ordinance is very closely follows Boise. It includes a provision prohibiting false reports and includes direct reference to the mediation process. And I can't remember and don't know that I saw whether your proposed ordinance includes any language concerning the prohibition of false reports.
It does not, and the reason why I didn't put it in there is because it's illegal to file a false report anyway under state law. So I didn't want to put it in our city code for the same reason I just explained. It creates a potential inconsistency. And then I already explained why I was thinking that a resolution is preferable in the way I draft ordinances than putting the process in the ordinance itself.
Okay. And then you've already discussed a little bit, although I'm not real comfortable with it, why two-family dwellings, i.e. duplexes, and rooms within boarding houses are excluded all. And then the last, you had some considerations, and I presume this is going to stay as a draft, and we're going to push it forward for more review.
At this point, the Human Rights Commission and the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission would like to have this run by their meetings to
Good.
review. So I was just going to have us review
Accept
this
it.
today, and accept the report and review it, and then send it on for more input. And also, since those two commissions also wanted to allow opportunities for public comment and input also. And I think we would not only forward the draft ordinance language and a proposed resolution language, but the recommendation of the city attorney to put the guidelines in the resolution as opposed to the ordinance, so that the process would be in the resolution and not in the that's what I'm understanding that you were recommending.
Yes, the process is not in the ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
So that it would be in the resolution part rather than the ordinance, so that it would be less complicated and less likely to have difficulties. So did you want to say anything else?
No.
And I see Councilman Steed raising his hand. Is there something you need to say before we?
We're going to pass it forward? No, not at this time.
Okay.
And just I'll reiterate one more time. It's just redundant, but this is a place to start talking about it. There isn't anything in here that can't be discussed, and that's why I put the considerations in there so that people didn't feel like just because it came out of my office in this draft form that this is the way it needs to be. Mm-hmm. There are some things that I would think are more important than others, but there are a lot of things in here that could be approached in different ways and still be effective, however you want.
It's a lot of work, Randy.
Okay. And we appreciate this as your crowning glory and swan song. Yes, Mr.
So the direction is to pass this on to Fair and Affordable Housing Commission and Human Rights Commission for consideration and return to this committee with recommendations?
Yep.
Thank you.
Public input.
And, well, this is
How do we get-
legislative, so there will be public input
Yeah,
anyway, right?
they'll run their meetings, seek public input if that was what their desire is, but certainly as it comes through here again and through City Council, public input will be,
Right.
I imagine, will be sought.
Okay. Fine.
Ken, did you want to?
Could I have a few minutes to address them?
Very
Well,
few.
that's
We have a
up to
couple
Sue.
other items. Thank you.
I'll try to
Is
stick
this going to be, go ahead.
I'll try to stick to just
State your
real
name
broad issues then. Oops.
Okay, and
My
are you
name-
representing one of the commissions?
I'm not. I'm on a commission, but I'm not here today representing them because Randy's draft ordinance hadn't come to us before we could
Okay.
look at it. So we
So
don't
it
have
will.
an official position.
Okay, so it will come to the commission for discussion and input.
Yes.
Okay,
And it's been distributed to our members now, and so we'll be talking about it at our next meeting. But, so I'm here as an individual. I can't speak on
Okay.
behalf of our commission. But I just, since
Name and address.
Ken Nagy, 508 West Chestnut Street, Genesee, Idaho, 83832. And I'll just talk about some very broad issues. I did meet with Randy and the others to talk about this, and I wanted to start with a comment that Wayne made about kind of the slippery slope issue, because that is a concern. We talk about discrimination, and we talk about, do we need to prohibit all discrimination? Discrimination is a desirable thing. We have to have discrimination, or we can never make decisions about things. A landlord has to be able to discriminate between two tenants to decide who's the better risk, who's the more desirable tenant. We just want to make sure that they're not discriminating on the basis of certain statuses that have been, as Congress has called it, traditionally discriminated against. So I would encourage you to think about not a slippery slope, but what areas, what attributes about us need protection. And I would encourage you to think that it would be attributes that are traditionally discriminated against for irrational reasons. In my mind, there's no rational reason to discriminate against a person based on the basis of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. In my mind, that is in the group of other protected statuses like race, color, religion, sex, national origin, things like that. Now, ironically, there are certain protected statuses that I think an argument, and a landlord could make a logical argument that there is a rational reason to discriminate against them. Those two are families with children and disability. Those are our two most common forms of discrimination in this state and throughout the country. And families with children, I've often joked that people wouldn't want to have rented to our family when our kids were little, just because our kids were tough on a place. On the other hand, Congress has said, what policy message would we be sending by allowing landlords to discriminate against individuals because of the presence of minor children? We want to promote stable families. With disability, disabled people often come with service animals. A lot of landlords try to keep animals out of their rentals for legitimate reasons. They can't do that if it's a service animal. So I'm not encouraging people to discriminate on those bases. I'm trying to just simply show you that there are certain types of discrimination that an argument could be made, but we still don't allow it. But this type of discrimination, sexual orientation, gender identity, in my mind, it falls into the other group. There is no rational reason to discriminate against somebody. Now, if you have reasons to believe that a person won't be a good employee or a good tenant, that's different. Then you can discriminate against them on those other legal, rational bases. But just simply because they're gay doesn't make sense.
Okay, Mr. Nagy, because we have a time constraint and other items on our agenda, I gave you a couple, 3 minutes because you took the time to come in today. But I think you'll have ample opportunity to make your comments, both at the commission level and then when it comes back to admin and then when it comes to council.
I appreciate that. And I'm satisfied that you are allowing us the opportunity to review it and to get public input, because I think that's so important. And we just want to make sure that happens.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
today.
Thanks, Ken, appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, we already gave you the instructions.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sir, that's kind of nice.
Sorry, I'm getting confused myself.
Well, we don't have to worry about identity yet today.